What we are dealing with is a collapse of our manufacturing sector and the loss of millions of good jobs. And we have to put that issue out on the table and demand that corporate America start reinvesting in this country, start building the products that we consume so that we can put people back to work in manufacturing. Huge issue. Second issue. We have an infrastructure today which is in terrible shape. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we need several $1 trillion of investment in the very near future just to bring us up to where we should be. They give us a D in terms of infrastructure. I was a mayor, and I can tell you that infrastructure improvement is expensive. But you know what else infrastructure does? When you rebuild your roads, you rebuild your bridges, you rebuild your water systems, you provide broadband, high-quality internet service to everybody, including the rural areas. You rebuild your public transportation and your rail systems and your subways. You know what you do? You make our nation wealthier and you put millions of people to work. Maybe we have to invest in our infrastructure. This year, approximately, numbers vary a little bit, we're going to be spending $350 billion, that's $1 billion a day, importing oil from Saudi Arabia, from the Middle East, from Venezuela, from Mexico, Canada, countries all over the world. $350 billion importing oil from abroad. Meanwhile, we have a crisis in terms of global warming. Meanwhile, we are stuck in a war in Iraq, which was essentially fought over oil. Maybe the time is now to stop spending billions importing oil, but putting people to work in this country, moving us to energy efficiency, sustainable energy, and energy independence. Maybe we can do that. So while the middle class is collapsing and poverty is increasing and the gap between the rich and the poor is growing wider, there is a lot that we can do and there is a lot that we must do. But here is, again, all of you know. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We have a fairly dismal political situation. For many, many years in this country, which has for a long time been a two-party country, we have had one party, the Democratic Party, which has been what we would call a center-left party. Not really a terribly progressive party, but a center-left party. During the Depression, as all of you know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked around the country in which 25% of its people were unemployed, where people were hungry, where farmers were thrown off the land, people were thrown out of their homes, and he came up with a radical concept. And that is that the United States government must play a role in a democratic society to protect working families. And Roosevelt implemented, as you know, a number of programs, from works programs, public works programs, and you go around Vermont, you still see buildings, public buildings built in the 1930s, to Social Security, to health care programs, and so forth and so on. And from 1932 until today, what the Democratic Party was about is protecting the needs of working families, the middle class, lower income people. That was a center-left party that said, we believe that the government has an important role to take care of ordinary people, help them send their kids to college, pay for child care, deal with health care, deal with the environment so that our kids are not breathing garbage and coming down with illness. Government should play that role. And that was a center-left party called the Democratic Party. Then you had a center-right party for many years called the Republican Party. Conservative, saying we believed in smaller government, but basically accepting many of the premises, not wanting to do as much, but understanding that in a civilized democratic society, you have got to pay attention to the most vulnerable and to the weakest. They understood that. And what has happened in recent years for a number of reasons, and we can talk about it, maybe you can ask me questions about it, although I certainly don't have all of the answers. There has been a significant movement toward the right. And what you now have is within the Democratic Party, a centrist party. Some progressives, and I work with those, some conservatives, many people just about in the middle. And the Republican Party has moved from being a center-right party to an extreme right party. And that is clearer today as a result of the last election than it has ever been. And you have people who ran for office and who won election who basically have said, and they're pretty honest, you got to give them credit for that, they believe that government should play a very, very minimal role in our lives. Of course, we need a Department of Defense, they believe, etc., a few other things. But when it comes to issues like, should it be the responsibility of the United States government to make sure that elderly people in this country have a Social Security program and guaranteed income when they get old? No? A lot of Republicans say, no, I don't believe that's the function of government. I don't believe that. If people want a retirement account when they're old, it is not, they say, the responsibility of government, invest that money in a retirement account. It's not the function of the government. Go to Wall Street with that. Should government be there when you are 75 years of age and you're diagnosed with cancer? And we have a Medicare program guaranteeing health care to old people? No. That's not the responsibility of the government. When you're 75 and you're poor and you're diagnosed with cancer, you just go out there and get your good old private insurance account. Be a lot of private insurance companies delighted to insure you. And what about if you're poor and your kids get sick? Should we have a health insurance program for the poor called Medicaid? No. And what you're seeing today, pay attention. You're seeing in Arizona and other states now a movement to throw hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people off of Medicaid because we can't just afford to do it. I'm sorry. We really don't want to see you die. You're in Arizona. You're online for a transplant. Sorry, we can't afford it. And you have to die. That is the reality of today. According to your own local little university here called Harvard, they did a study and they found that 45,000 Americans died last year because they didn't get to a doctor when they should have. That number will certainly increase this year. You'll see, we're throwing people off of Medicaid, they have no place to go. That is exactly what will happen. So where we are right now, politically, is in an extraordinarily important moment in American history. Objectively speaking, we have millions of people working longer hours for lower wages. If you go beyond the official statistics, which tell us that 9% of the people are unemployed, you know what the reality is? Those statistics do not include people who have given up looking for work. So if you're in a high unemployment area, you're not part of that statistic. Those statistics do not include the millions of people who are working 20 hours a week who want to work 40 hours a week. So we have a massive unemployment problem. In terms of health insurance today, 50 million people have no health insurance. Many others are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. The health care reform bill that our Republican friends want to repeal certainly does not go as far as I would like to go. But it is a step forward. In my view, and I hope my own state of Vermont will lead the country in this direction, we have got to go forward with a Medicare for All single-payer program. But where we are right now is a country, A, with enormous problems facing the middle class. Poverty is increasing. Highest rate of childhood poverty. That's a reality. But politically, where we are at now is a nation which is moving further and further to the right, and a government which is abdicating its responsibility to address those issues. So again, the reason that I was on the floor for 8.5 hours was not just because I regarded it as totally asinine. It's not the right word, that's the right word. That when the wealthiest people in this country have never had so much, that to drive up the national debt for our kids and grandchildren in order to give these guys huge tax breaks made no sense to me at all. But what I also worried about, and if you buy the book, you'll see me talking about it, is that what I understood, of course, is that when you drive up the national debt by giving tax breaks to people who don't need it, you're going to have these same people who did that come back and say, oh, my goodness, we have a large national debt, and we're going to have to cut spending. You know, it's like believing in energy efficiency and a 20 below zero day, leaving your windows and doors wide open and say, my goodness, it's getting chilly in here. No kidding. When you give huge tax breaks to people who don't need it, you're going to drive up the deficit. And then their response is, we're going to have to cut. Now, I'm going to be on a plane tomorrow at 12 o'clock, leaving for Burlington to Washington. Tomorrow, the president is going to announce his budget. It is going to be a terrible budget. And the Republican proposals are even worse. What we are going to be fighting for as soon as we get back is whether or not people in Vermont and Massachusetts will be going cold this winter or next winter because of massive cuts in the low-income heating assistance program called LIHEAP. We're going to be looking at massive cuts in what is called the WIC program, by which pregnant women and moms and little babies get the nutrition that they need in order to be healthy. We're looking at cuts in education. We're looking at cuts in health care. I worked very hard in the health care reform bill to expand the program which your own Senator Kennedy actually developed in the 1960s. It's called the Federally Qualified Health Center Program. And what that program is about, and it's very popular here in Massachusetts, increasingly so in Vermont, is we have health centers. You all know you have community health centers. And by law, these community health centers must allow anybody who walks in the door get health care. If you don't have any health insurance, you get it on a sliding scale basis. You get dental care. You get mental health counseling. You get the lowest cost prescription drugs available in America. And Kennedy led that effort, and I work with him. And we miss him very much. I work with him because he was chairman of the committee that I'm on. And what we did is doubled the funding for that program. So from 20 million people who are now accessing those health care centers, we're going to go to 40 million in the next 5 years. Republicans want to decimate that. So millions of people will not be able to find a doctor. What happens when you get sick and you can't find a doctor? I don't know. Those are the struggles that we face. Let me conclude by just saying this. You know, in this country, and I'm sure in this church, if there was a kind of a little video that was going from the beginning of this church to today, there's a lot of history here and a lot of discussions that have taken place here. This country has seen wonderful times and very difficult times. And right now we're in the midst of a difficult time, but I think we do not have the luxury. We do not have the luxury of becoming cynical, of throwing up our hands in despair and saying it's too much, I can't deal with it. We have got a lot of work in front of us. We have a growing right wing in this country, and what saddens me very much is not that corporate America or the billionaires are trying to get tax breaks while we increase childhood poverty and more people go hungry. That doesn't shock me, frankly. But what does bother me, and we've got to work on a lot of working people out there, people who are hurting, and I meet them all of the time. They are hurting. They lost their small business. Their kids can't get a decent job. And they have been told that the enemy of everything is the government. That's the enemy. It's not Wall Street. It's not the corporations that ship their jobs to China. It's not their employers who are cutting their pension programs. It's government, government, government. Well, God knows government has its share of problems, and we don't want to, for 1 minute, suggest that everything government does is good. But a lot of these people have been brainwashed by folks who want to see government emasculated so that they can have more wealth and more power, and that's what it's about. So we've got a big struggle on our hands. And I think what we've got to do is two things, basically. We've got to educate. Educate and educate. There are a lot of people who are hurting, and they don't know why they're hurting. They don't know why they're hurting. They don't know about trade policy. They don't know why we are the only country in the industrialized world that doesn't provide health care to all people. We've got a lot of explaining. We've got to deal with the media out there, which is a very difficult problem because the media very rarely deals with the reality of people's lives. Just give you one example. We have a website. It's called sanders.senate.gov. Tomorrow, I believe, we will be publishing the result of requests that we made in Vermont. What we said to people in Vermont is, tell us your experience in the recession. There are some economists who tell us the recession is over. I personally don't believe it. I want you to tell me what's going on in your family. We are a small state. We got 400 people who responded. We're going to publish many of those letters. Read what those letters have to say, and they won't shock you, because you have friends who are in the same exact boat. Some of you may be in the boat. Old people who have worked their entire lives and have seen their savings gone. They don't know what they're going to do for retirement. Young people who are told they have to go to college, now saddled with enormous debt, etc., etc., etc. Real stories of real people. So what we have got to do is reach out, we have got to educate, we have got to organize, we've got to do our best.